Mom, do you have a meeting today? And I'm like, yeah. Okay, I'll be watching for it. Uncle, I am gone. I'll leave next Tuesday and get back Wednesday of our board meeting. I'm not a
Okay. Yep.
Yep. Okay. Ooh, I got the low chair today. Nope, not that one. This one. There we go.
We have some added agenda items, looks like.
Just first one is information on June, the holiday,
Yep.
June 13th, Juneteenth, and then
Okay, so I have a number of,
yes,
I hope I have the right packets, but I think we're there.
What?
so he has an amended agenda, and what he's doing is, we just found out it is not effective this year, but it is mandatory to be effective next year. We're just going to state,
Oh, Juneteenth.
All the,
just state that we're
Gotcha.
going
Yeah.
to. Originally, he was concerned that it
Yeah, I
was
wrote
actually
this so you
effective
could
this
read
year.
it because I'm not going to say a word during the. I
okay.
won't abstain from everything, just so you know why.
Is that what you were asked to do?
Lewis just tried to reach me again.
Or you're just
Yeah,
to be,
well, I
oh
talked
boy,
to the lawyer
Juneteenth
yesterday,
is
and
effective.
that's what he
It
suggested?
was a later bill
yeah,
that
and it's,
made it
I
effective.
believe, after I talked to him, that it's the
Oh,
smart
so
thing
we'll
to do.
pass the thing that you.
Yeah, yep. There you
There
go.
you
I
go.
got a lot to
told
say
you
about it.
I
I could
know
talk
you
for 2
do.
hours.
Okay.
Don't do that today.
Thank you.
I
See,
won't do
you were
that.
so
I
prepared.
literally
I'm
have
not
to-
going to say a word, so
Okay.
you're going to be lucky. You're going to get lucky because
Oh, we're getting it, is that Monday?
So,
Yeah,
just
it's
found
for,
out that there was a later bill passed that actually made it effective this year.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
so we are going to have a motion to
Yeah.
modify our plan.
That's what I was gonna mention because we had to readjust our city calendar
Yep.
as well. So yeah, initially it was to go into effect next year, but they said let's do it,
Yep.
and that's fine.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's a
Last thing we want to do is make a deal about it.
you know what really fries me is we passed that
Negative.
last as constructed. And they knew that I was looking for the original profile. The county notified me that they had it in their possession when we passed it and never showed it to us.
Call the vote on that.
Hope so. That ain't right.
Dang it right.
When we passed that, as constructed, that they're saying
We're
we
speaking to our mics.
Speaking
to our
we
mics.
did that, they knew that I was looking for the original at the time, the official profile. And I found out they had it the whole time, never showed it to any of the managers.
You have to
So we left
celebrate
it on
something
that.
going on in Texas.
Because they said so.
When?
trade self.
Yeah,
Well,
Texas
actually, I was
is just
told
a
by
Spanish word
staff
for
that
Northeast
they've known
Texas.
about it for years.
It is.
So
So the profile we passed, before we did that, we should have been showing the official profile from the county because that is the official profile.
so
Yeah,
let
it was
me.
identify,
Oh, we had a crowd this morning. Huh?
like have,
A little bit. It's about the,
Question.
Which
Senator
alternative four is to
That
I
take
think
the ditch
there's some
down to
interest there.
Yeah,
previous
knowledge of because
standards.
I don't know if they had
Looks
it,
like
if they
2.232.
knew, if they
Okay,
didn't
and
have it
there's
printed out,
to
they
maintain
absolutely
the
knew where
ditch.
it
That's the
was.
spirit.
They told me they knew right where I was online for years.
Had previously board established.
It might be, you might want to just forget it, to be honest with you, but because it may,
My favorite thing to do it.
yeah, but you might stop.
Yeah, that would be best in
Spend
Which would require us,
your,
here, we got the,
annual
I
assessment.
think we got it.
we got it on a packet.
How are we gonna do this?
Hi.
Right. Well, we made a decision because the city had received
nope.
Okay.
However,
You got 2 microphones. You're fancy. All this.
no, I was
Other than
just
that,
No, no,
Lorraine,
no. I get it.
sending it out to the whole.
I understand.
Please
And it's
report.
really hard to navigate
And
Correct.
issues that
the
have
reason that-
emotion involved. It's really, really hard.
Well, I don't know how the
But I didn't have it.
As constructed, subsequently
Okay.
improved conditions. Got it.
Mike,
Ready? All right. Let's call the meeting to order. Today is June 14th, 2023. It's 9 a.m. We are at our usual meeting place at Shoreview City Hall Council Chambers. Roll call, I see that all managers are present. And I'll set the agenda. Mr. Administrator, you have an addition or two?
yes, Manager Bradley, we have a couple of changes on the agenda. I have handed out a revised one. For the record, I added a new number 1, which is in regards to the Juneteenth holiday. You also have a memo in front of you regarding that. So that will fill the new number 1 spot. And then also items on the published, I'll say, agenda, number 3, on the U.S. Geological Survey, and number 6 on the copier scanner. On the revised agenda, I've moved them to the 7th and 8th position. And then if the board is under time constraint or under quite a bit of mental deliberation on matters, we could look to table those if you wish.
Very good.
It's a pain reliever, huh?
At this point,
No other changes.
I move that we approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Approved. Next on our agenda is approval of the minutes. May 24th regular meeting and June 5 special workshop. Do I have a motion to approve those?
Mr. Chair, I will move approval of the minutes as referenced.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Any changes? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. Okay. Consent agenda. Patrick?
Good morning, board. Yes, staff have one application for your consideration today. Staff are recommending no changes.
Does anyone have questions of Patrick? Hearing none, does anyone would care to make a motion?
Mr. President, I move to Caprock permit number 23-031.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. So we are at the program cost share application. Molly Nelson. Hi, Molly.
Mr. President, Board of Managers, for your review today, we have 2 applications under conditional approval, one in Ramsey County and one in Anoka County.
Anyone have any questions of Molly?
Mr. Chair, I would move that we approve the water quality grant number R23-05 and R23-01.
Apparently it's A23.
Oh, thank you. A23-01.
Is there a second? I'll second it. Any discussion?
Mr. Chair, I was at the Citizens Advisory Committee meeting this past week, and once again, I would like to thank the Molly and Kendra and staff, as well as all of those Citizens Advisory members. They take the discussion on each of these applications very seriously, and it's very encouraging watching their deliberations.
Very good. Did I take a vote yet or not? All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Hearing none, passes. Molly, thank you.
Thank you.
Come to our part of our agenda where it's open mic for anyone in the audience or on the telephone who would like to make comments on issues not on our agenda already. It's an opportunity to come forward and do that. So anyone would like to speak to us? Anyone on the phone would like to speak to us? Hearing. Excuse me, if it's on the agenda? Okay, then we'll wait for that one. All right, thank you. All right, so moving on. Next item is the Centerville Lake Water Management District, Matt Koshin.
Whoop.
Nope.
No.
Oh, that's right. Oh,
Yep.
Juneteenth. See, I'm working, you know.
Working on the color-coded one.
All right,
Manager Bradley? Yep.
please.
So the next on the agenda is our Juneteenth holiday. I did hand out a memo before each of you this morning. I will read from it under background. The Juneteenth holiday recognizes the abolishment of slavery in the United States. It marks the day when federal troops arrived in Galveston, Texas in 1865 to take control of the state and ensure that all enslaved people be freed. The troops' arrival came a full 2.5 years after the signing of the Emancipation Proclamation. Juneteenth honors the end of slavery in the United States. On June 17, 2021, Juneteenth officially became a federal holiday. Earlier this year, the Minnesota House and Senate passed bills to establish it as a state-recognized holiday. Governor Tim Walz signed the bill into law. There has been a lot of public entity inquiry to understand the effective date of the new holiday, whether it be 2023 or 24. Lewis will speak to that in a moment. But district staff are under the understanding now it to be a mandatory state and watershed district holiday starting next week here in 2023. You'll see a proposed motion below, but I would ask Lewis to maybe clarify how we got to 2023 versus 2024.
Lewis?
Mr. President, managers, this is a new specialty for me, holiday law, and as I get older, I hope to specialize in vacation law as well. There is some confusion because in February, Governor Walz signed the bill making Juneteenth a holiday the law to be effective August 1st of this year, which would make the first Juneteenth holiday in 2024. However, later this legislative session, the legislature also passed another bill which made it effective in this 2023. So Juneteenth 2023 is a holiday, mandatory state holiday for this year.
Thank you, because I had researched it before the passage of the second bill, so I was misinformed by myself. So thank you for that information.
Mr. President,
Mr. Wallen.
thank you. Just for a little correction here, so the Emancipation Proclamation didn't do away with slavery. It only did it away with in the slave states was in rebellion. It's the 13th Amendment, which was passed in January 1865. Just keep the record straight. So slavery states such as Delaware, Missouri, Kentucky, and Maryland, which were still with the federal government at that time, didn't have their slavery abolished in 1863 because they were not states in rebellion.
Very good.
So we need a motion.
Yes, Manager Bradley, we do have a motion below there. It is to amend the RCWD handbook, and then we'll adjust the board calendar accordingly. We would also post this on our website and take any other necessary materials to be updated.
And I would move to establish and observe Juneteenth as a Rice Creek Watershed District holiday and accordingly amend Section 7.1 holidays of the Rice Creek Watershed District Handbook, board calendar, and as otherwise necessary in district materials.
I'll second that.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
No opposed, passes 5-0. So now we get to Centerville Lake water. Matt, welcome.
There we go. Mr. President, members of the board, thank you for having me. We are here with a continuation of the discussion on Centerville Lake and a potential water management district that occurred at your regular workshop this past Monday. I'll note there are a number of residents of Centerville Lake here to learn about this item, perhaps wishing to comment at some point during this item. But you'll note there's nothing in your packet. I have a few slides here to jog the board's memory and kind of get us in position to look at a couple of motions at the end of this presentation. So as we talked about, Centerville Lake has water quality problems. Here's some photos from Centerville Lake. Algae blooms are frequent and sometimes severe. Oftentimes this is blue-green algae. We talked about that also, the problems that go along with blue-green algae. This computer, there we go. We monitor water quality on Centerville Lake. Here we're looking at blue bars and green bars indicating total phosphorus and chlorophyll A, respectively. Centerville Lake is a little bit unusual in our watershed in that there's a statistically significant increasing trend in both phosphorus and chlorophyll A. So we're seeing more nutrients and we're seeing more algae in Centerville Lake year over year. I'm sure the residents could attest to this from their visual observations, but this is borne out in our monitoring data. So we've done a number of diagnostic studies now on Centerville Lake looking at the sources of this phosphorus, what's driving these algae blooms. What's clear to us is that a big part of this is internal phosphorus loading. That's phosphorus that's being recycled inside of the lake. A common treatment for a problem like that is an alum treatment. The board recalls that we did that on Bald Eagle Lake a number of years ago. That's a very common treatment. There are other ways to address internal loading, and so oftentimes the words that we use in some of the motions here are addressing internal nutrient loading and not being so specific as to say alum. There are some other tools, but typically it's alum. So we've done some of these diagnostic studies, gone so far as to develop a rough budget. So all of the recent discussions have been around the budget number of $1 million. The budget range that we've seen in the past couple of years has been anywhere from $850,000 to $1.3 million, depending on how you cost out the product and exactly how much of it we plan to use. But the $1 million mark provides a good rough budget at this time. And that's how the discussions of the Water Management District have come along with that budget number. So last fall, the board recalls that we received a letter from the Centerville Lake Association requesting that the board take action on this problem and specifically considering a special tax district. That would be a water management district. That is the type of special tax district that the Rice Creek Watershed District can create and oversee. You'll recall that the same type of water management district was enacted on Bald Eagle Lake to help fund the alum treatment there. So at the time, this was last September, the board directed Houston Engineering to develop alternatives for a water management district. That was the technical memo that we reviewed at the workshop on Monday, presenting several alternatives or concept level ideas that could go into a water management district. And what we came up with, looking at these different ideas, the board by consensus agreed upon concept 2B. That is a benefit-based assessment, and there's a stepped fee based on whether or not homeowners on Centerville Lake have direct riparian access or deeded access. Again, that's the same type of system that was used on Bald Eagle Lake. Important to note that although the memo had actual dollar amounts shown on those tables, the water management district that you would be setting up provides a framework, not a specific dollar amount. So the dollar amounts shown here are based on that assumed budget of $1 million, and also, the number of homes and the cost of alum and some other things like that. So again, what you'd be voting on here today or moving to advance not a specific dollar amount, but a framework. So with that, the next steps here then would be to amend our watershed management plan to include the new water management district. Our current watershed management plan has several water management districts laid out in it. We would be adding a new one here, and so an amendment to our watershed management plan is necessary. We're also suggesting that we edit some of the language in the capital improvement project section to better incorporate and reflect the proposed project that we're moving ahead with. Also, as we've talked about extensively, we're looking forward to a Clean Water Fund grant application. So it's with those two items then that we have these proposed motions. So the first motion again, it's directing the staff and the district engineer to develop draft language for a watershed management plan amendment. That would then come to the board at a later date with a public hearing and everything like that that goes along with a watershed management plan amendment. And then secondly, directing staff to prepare and submit a Clean Water Fund grant application. So that's what I had. This is, again, a review of the workshop minutes. If the board has any questions or the board would like to invite any residents to come forward.
Before we invite the residents to come up, are there any questions of Matt at this point?
I don't, Mr. President, I don't have any questions, but I do, when we get to the discussion part, I'll have a comment.
Very good. Is there anyone in the public who would like to address us concerning this item? Please. If you just state your name and address.
Hi, I'm Kimberly Gansel at 1339 Mound Trail in Centerville. And I just wanted to say that we are really thankful for all of the work that Matt has done and the support from the Rice Creek Watershed Board. On behalf of the Centerville Lake Association, we are very much aligned and supportive of the plan to be concept and would be grateful for a motion to move forward with these proposed motions here. So,
very good. Thank you. Any questions? Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to address this issue? If not, we have a motion, please. So I move to direct district staff and the engineer to draft language for a water management plan amendment incorporating new water management district for Centerville Lake and language supporting an internal nutrient loading management project. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Okay.
You got it first.
Is there any discussion on that motion?
Mr. President, well, first of all, thank all you folks that have come here about the Centerville Lake today. Thank you very much. And just last night I had a conversation with Commissioner Reinhardt, and I received lots of compliments about Matt. And this project, he seems to be very supportive of it, amongst other things we were talking about. Anyways, I wanted to mention to you, since you're here as the association today, associations have a lot of power. As Mr. President Bradley has reminded me once that I made a comment about a bus being driven by the Bald Eagle Lake Association, and I have told other people they should get a bus just like they have because they are so successful as a political organization doing things here at the district. So I encourage you to act that way. And one of the things I wanted to mention that you might consider now at this time is I understood they took the pump house out of the St. Paul Water Authority out of the lake. Okay, that's a nice step after 150 years of it being there. But I also would ask you to be aware that the St. Paul Water Authority had easements around that lake and also Peltier. And if it's possible that your Lake Owners Association, since they're in the mood of removing things, maybe they'd remove those easements or land issues and transfer them to Anoka County. I'm just making that as a suggestion. You don't have to follow it, and just this is a brainstorming opportunity here. And then also the dam on Peltier Lake is owned by the St. Paul Water Authority, and they transfer that dam to the county park system or county system there. I just suggest that as other steps for you and the lake owners in the Centerville, Lionel Lakes area it doesn't mean any more than just to bring your knowledge to it, awareness of it, and whatever your group decides to do as a big political bus.
So ownership of that dam at some point will become relevant because at some point there's going to need to be maintenance on that.
Well, there is, and Mr. President, you're exactly correct, because in 1988, when they drained the lake down for the Water Authority, the last time they used it now, they then came in 98 and put 3 feet on that dam. So the operation of it then would be nice if it was in more local control than the St. Paul Water Authority. And I think, I'm not certain about, but I believe there's another dam obstruction down on Baldwin Lake, which is the other end of the chain of lakes, you know, and maybe that the Water Authority has. So maybe there's an opportunity for them, since they're being interested in relinquishing their power. You know, I mean, it's just been there. They've had it since about the 1870s, and so maybe they're in a giving mood. That's my only comment.
Briefly, I live on Bald Eagle. I was there when we went around and got everyone's signatures to approve what you've approved. It's wonderful to see that kind of grassroots people willing to tax themselves for the public good. So I applaud you. I can tell you, having lived where we called it Bald Eagle Blue when it was green, and knowing you couldn't sell your house in August, it's important. And it's important to all the people, not just who live on that lake, but all the people who use the parks and have public access to it. So it's a good public benefit. So all in favor of the first motion, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Second motion I will make to direct district staff to develop and submit a Bowser, that's the Board of Water and Soil Resources, Clean Water Fund grant application to support an internal nutrient load reduction project on Centerville Lake. In other words,
I'll
try to
second
get some
that.
public funding.
I'll second that.
All right. Any discussion?
Mr. President, just to remind you all here that is the words that Matthew used earlier today, this is a framework, and that the dollar amounts are just for workshop purposes. They're not for real yet. So they could change, and not always for the better, being going down, rather they may go up. So I just wanted you to be aware of that, and I assume that the staff will proceed is immediately after we get done with this vote to begin submit the proper paperwork so we can have some money from the state to help pay for this.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I can't pass up the opportunity to again to once remind folks that the Clean Water Fund is part of the Minnesota Legacy Amendment, which is what the citizens of the state of Minnesota agreed to tax themselves for exactly projects like this. So,
Manager Wagaman?
I know that there's a state park, I believe, on that, or a
County park.
County park. Can they be involved in any of the funding, or are they exempt from all of the funding for that?
Manager Bradley, Board of Managers, yes, it is intended that the district has, in fact, approached both the county and the city of Centerville, Anoka County and the city of Centerville, and the framework that you approved today will be brought to them in discussion of what those dollar amounts or what level of participation they may have.
So to answer your question a little more detail, they would not be part of the water management district. They wouldn't be taxed.
Right.
But we have approached them for participation with grants or funding, otherwise helping pay for it. And they've indicated they believe they would have some funds available to support this. That's about it. You say it's stronger than that or not?
I'd say that was put well. Yep.
Okay.
Mr. President, the district has a past history of cooperation with Anoka County in that particular area in the park and purchasing properties that went in there. So this isn't a no shock and awe situation. This is a continuation of a long-term program.
Mr. President, thank you. So, Matt, just a question of clarification. Obviously, this is super personal to you guys. This is literally your backyard. Can we estimate, just to make things realistic, the timeline on applying for a grant and maybe just a time estimate of how long that takes and what that process looks like? Just so, again, we're setting reasonable expectations for action on our part.
Sure, yeah. President Bradley, Manager Robertson. Your question is specifically about the grant application?
Yeah, what kind of timeline is that on? Just so we can give the residents a realistic expectation on, when the watershed will actually be doing all the things that we've referenced.
Yep. So the Clean Water Fund grant cycle is set to open later this month. Don't have an exact date yet, and then should close sometime in August. So district staff have already been working to prepare for that. The motion that you're voting on now is the formality of us actually submitting the application when the time comes due. Review of those applications is done then later this calendar year, and awards are right around the end of the calendar year and leading into the new year. So typically, notices of award are received early in January. Work plans and grant agreements are then developed shortly after that. Typically, grant agreements are done late winter, early spring. That's putting us on a very short timeline for potentially doing alum in 2024. So the most aggressive timeline could be for potentially starting a project next year, but don't want to suggest that that's a certainty by any stretch.
Thank you, Matt.
That was a great question. Thank you. So, any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none. Thank you again for coming today and participating. So, next on our agenda is the Peterson Companies, Inc. final pay request, Long Lake Fish Barrier. Matt, you're still up.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, thank you for having me again. So this is the final pay request for Peterson Companies for our Lake Johanna carp barrier. Several members of the board saw this in action at our city-county partner meeting this past spring. So recall, and I don't have a presentation here, I just have a number of slides, and I can share with you, again, the photos that we took at the site here. So recall again, this project was part of our Long Lake Lino Chain of Lakes Carp Management Program. Most of our efforts in that program are dedicated to removing carp as they move up Rice Creek, but a smaller portion of the carp population moves up what we call Johanna Creek. That's near the New Brighton Community Center. That's where the city-county partner meeting was this past spring. This was identified as a priority area to put in a barrier to block carp migration. The primary purpose of the barrier is to prevent carp from accessing spawning areas upstream of that. So the carp are moving from Long Lake downstream through this small creek in the spring to spawning areas upstream. The primary purpose of the barrier is to block them so that they cannot access those spawning areas. Secondary purpose of the barrier is to create a spot where carp will aggregate and so that they can be removed by a company that we work with, Carp Solutions. So we got grant dollars to do this project. This was a watershed-based implementation funding grant. So 90% of the cost of this project is paid for by that program. Again, Manager Wynant mentioned the Clean Water Fund and the Clean Water Land and Legacy Amendment. So construction on this project occurred earlier this calendar year. Peterson Companies was awarded the contract. I'd say the construction was difficult due to conditions. I think they worked through a couple of different blizzards and then a rain event. Not exactly ideal construction conditions, but the final product is good. It's what we asked for. It's what Houston drew up in their plans. You'll note in the packet there that Houston has returned to this site, surveyed all of the structures and found them to be within tolerances in terms of elevations, openings, everything like that, to maintain hydrology of the system. So there's no backup of water up the system due to this new structure. In terms of the performance of the structure, it's been very good. This is the third structure of this type that we put in. The first one was designed by our very own Tom Schmidt, so I think we just need to call this the Schmidt barrier from now on. We need to trademark it. We're very happy with the way this is working. Most of the cost of this project has already been paid out to Peterson Companies. This is the last remaining cost, really just covering site restoration. If I can scroll down a little bit, you can see some of the site restoration that Peterson has done and releasing retainage. So the motion you have in the packet there is providing final payment and closing out this project. And happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Matt?
Is it trademarked yet, Matt, with Schmidt's name on it, or what's holding that up?
Not yet. I don't know. Yeah.
Maybe we can get one of those little tags made up.
Well, we could maybe get some revenue too, you know?
Mr. Chair, I would move to approve the final payment, including release of the retainage to Peterson Companies for Johanna Creek Fish Barrier projects in the amount of $5,487.50.
Second, please.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Passes 5-0. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you.
It's nicely cared for, too. People who come to the farmer's market are checking it out.
Mr. Administrator, what's up next?
Yes, Board of Managers, next on your agenda is an Oak County Ditch 102232, the evaluation of maintenance alternatives and the board direction. We have Tom Schmidt here to share the item. This is on page 63 of your packet.
Welcome.
Mr. President, Board of Managers. As you recall, you held a special workshop on June 5th to discuss the maintenance alternatives and the comments submitted related to them. During that workshop, you, as a group, arrived at a general consensus for alternative number 4. And the next step is for you to, if you so choose, to officially proclaim that or direct staff to work toward final development of that alternative for implementation or work toward that goal. That being so, I had included in my memo a proposed motion, and we've handed out a edited version of that motion this morning on the advice of John Kolb, who has joined us online.
Any questions? Mr. Administrator.
Manager Bradley, just to advance what Tom has said, I note the distinction between what's in the board packet and what was handed out is largely around implementation, suggests that it's a conclusive maybe or will lead to an outcome. But the emotion, as Manager Bradley, I think you said at one time, is we're going to ask the question. So if we ask the regulating entities how we need to go about this to secure their permits, we'll have that answer. And so that's what the altered motion suggests.
Would you, and as part of your motion, would you please briefly outline what alternative 4 is?
Sure. I move to direct staff to develop maintenance alternative number 4 as constructed and subsequently improved condition for ACD 102232 north of Pine Street by identifying and quantifying regulatory requirements, assessing the feasibility of the proposed alternative in light of the regulatory requirements, and engaging with the municipal partners, DNR, and other regulatory land use and road authorities as necessary to evaluate the feasibility of maintenance alternative number 4.
And alternative 4 includes lowering the level of Jodrell road culverts,
Yes.
and the currently permitted by DNR, uh, 137th Street.
Mm-hmm.
And so down, lowering those to the previously established ASIC, established by this board. And I will second that. Any discussion?
Mr. President, so this is kind of a framework. We've chosen an alternative. It doesn't necessarily mean that this is the last profile that could be adopted by the board. This is a beginning to go forward and see what the Department of Natural Resources, the City of Columbus, and the other entities which may or don't or may be involved in this, the Corps of Engineers. How could I forget them? And so, but it gives us, to use borrow Matt's word earlier, a framework to begin with.
In my opinion, it implements our policy as a board where reasonably feasible to repair and maintain ditches to the official ASIC levels, which was determined using our engineer in the manner we've used for all of the ditches since I've been on the board to establish an appropriate ASIC. So
I just wanted to make clear, Mr. President, in my opinion, it doesn't eliminate an adjustments in the ASIC in the future, and that there's process for that to be done. The DNR may require some, and citizens may also yet be involved in that situation.
So, any further discussion on this motion? Jess?
Thank you, Mr. President. So I did have some additional dialogue with staff in the last week, and what I shared with staff is part of my, I'm going to use the word frustration lightly, and please know I'm not trying to poke the bear here or stir any pots, but part of my frustration is I just don't feel that there's a finality to the issues that the residents have if we hang our hat on just alternative 4. So with that comment, I have 2 questions. Number 1, what type of cost is incurred with alternative 4? And my second question would be, does moving forward with alternative 4 limit us to the things that are identified in this motion? Or is this open to interpretation? Is it open to being modified? Is there, is it just exactly what's written in here? I guess that's my question, because again, I understand this is a longstanding issue, and I mean, I think we all want to come in here and find the right solution and, do our jobs appropriately. And I understand it's a very longstanding issue, and there's a lot of emotion and a lot of, personal animus almost amongst the parties engaged. And I don't want that. And I don't want to just approve a solution to put a Band-Aid on something. I want finality. And so those would be my 2 questions to my comment. And I don't know if you can even estimate costs associated and what it looks like to engage with municipal partners. Does that mean you send an email and now you've met your obligation? Or are we gonna sit down and really get into the weeds? I guess this just seems so vague to me. It doesn't feel like a solution. It feels like you're doing something just to do something. And again, I'm not trying to stir the pot or anything like that. And I know, Nick, we dialogued almost exactly this, so.
Manager Bradley, Board of Managers, Manager Robertson. First, I'd make a clear distinction here that the district is operating as the public drainage authority here, that we're contemplating and addressing the obligations that the district has specific to that. It may or may not result in an outcome that satisfy landowners in some particular way, the municipalities, et cetera. It's certainly our belief that it will improve it. Your engineer has documented that the modeling would do that. It would be a big change from when I and Tom came on board in 2008. I would think it's quite evident that the ditch functions, ACD 102232 North Pine Street, significantly better than it did at that time. Here, we're asking the question you asked, how much will this cost? In the past, I would say that the district generally took it at, forgive me, face value, that these matters were not surmountable by the district. The motions would direct staff to take those actions, to ask the questions. Until we ask them, we don't know what the extent of the DNR's response will be and the level of cost to assess what they're asking us to demonstrate or not. Maybe they just issue us a permit and we're good to go. Or it could be a long entrenched discussion at which we would return to the board and ask for them to guide us further.
So I previously asked the cost question. And the answer I got back with your upfront costs are your cost of your lawyers and your engineers preparing and presentation and meeting with the DNR, possibly the Corps and other interested parties, and then responding to the DNR's questions, looking for, if they want further information. And those costs started probably $50,000 and go up. Those are, if you will, part of our cost of repair. And then the question becomes, does the DNR say that you're going to have to mitigate how many acres of wetland? And how would, what's our bank capacity that we've already got banked for doing that? That we don't know. That could be substantially more. I mean, like millions. That's what we don't know. But until we ask the question, we don't know that. Until we ask the question, we don't know why we shouldn't ask that question. So that's where we are in terms of the cost of having to lower the permitted area. How we're hopeful that with the city's help and the citizens' help, because they can demonstrate that the DNR has established that permit too high, higher than they need to for their own purposes in terms of maintaining Carl's Avery Nature Reserve, and that they themselves are causing flooding, and that they should want to join us to address the flooding issue. Until we have those dialogues, we don't know the answers to those questions.
May I ask a follow-up question
Sure.
really quickly? When it comes to the cost of repair, the watershed is going to assume that cost, or are you going to assess landowners for the cost of the repairs that we're dialoguing?
The current position is that repairs are a ad valorem expense. Maintenance, and this is in the maintenance category. I had previously inquired of the lawyers and staff. Well, if we have to do replacement with wetland replacement credits, are those ad valorem expenses? And the answer was, to date, they always have been. Doesn't mean it has to be that way forever. It doesn't mean that when we get to a point where we say, well, we can't, if we have to pay for it for ad valorem, we just can't afford it, then we can't look for other solutions. But that's where we step into this with the assumption that would be ad valorem.
I'm going to abstain from the discussion, but can I ask a question?
Of course.
I was reading, Columbus has a CWPMP, and if I understood it correctly, that overrides the other statute. I don't know if I'm not sure I'm correct on that, but if it does, I was reading in there where they say that they do not have to mitigate for wetlands. And it has discussion about the as constructed and stuff about what that means and everything. Is that germane, what I'm saying, or?
I'm going to ask Mr. Kolb if you could comment, please.
if there is a comprehensive wetland management and protection plan, or whatever the acronym actually stands for, that's been adopted by the LGU, the terms of that CWPMP by rule under the Wetland Conservation Act would replace some of the specific requirements of the Wetland Conservation Act. And that's assuming that Bowser has reviewed and approved that. But that would only apply to consideration of mitigation required under the Wetland Conservation Act. It would not displace mitigation requirements that might be required under public waters law.
Could I follow up? I just think we should look at that. Somebody should take a look at that and read their CWPMP just to see what's in it and what it does do. Because there is language specifically addressing these issues in there. So it would be nice if somebody would take a look at it and see what that does or how it affects things.
Mr. Administrator.
Manager Bradley, Board of Managers, Manager Wagaman, yes, that's part of the outcome of what's proposed here as motions. And I would say it has been considered to some extent already. We know that north of Pine Street is going to be a Wetland Conservation Act application or consideration. It is modified by a board adopted and Bowser approved comprehensive wetland protection and management plan, reiterating what Mr. Kolb stated. It does not apply to public waters. It does not replace federal wetland law. And as you know, we strive to have those entities come into alignment with our local plan and the coordination we're trying to achieve, but that remains to be seen.
Thank you,
Mr. President. So just to, for my own clarity, while the emphasis here today, as I understand it, is primarily on the drainage law under Chapter E, the complaint we've heard during this whole proceedings has been about flooding, which is not only about the drainage law. The drainage law is one portion of that. So there are other pieces that are important, and I assume, maybe I'm incorrect after listening to you, Nick, that the use of the words here that it said that you were going to engage our other partners, that being the city, because as we've heard a large complaint about the city of Street Jordell creating a dam and harming the water flows through those soils and causing backup of that. And so while that isn't directly maybe a Chapter E issue, but it is part of the complex flooding issues that are created here. And so I hope that this language is broad enough that that's going to be considered also, as it here, engaging municipal partners such as how their stormwater plan may be modified, for example, or adjusted in order to, along with their road authority. So I just want to point out here, I don't see this as an end, a finality yet. I see it as a step forward, and it's going to be adjusted forward or back, I'm sure. That's just the process. But
Administrator.
Manager Bradley, Board of Managers, in general response to Manager Waller's comments, the intent of engaging with our partners here, I would say, is broadly one, to see if there is any additional leverage, being a road authority that might assist in having the DNR as a public waters authority come into alignment with our thinking on the maintenance of the drainage system. Beyond that, the district, through its engineer, has studied Jodrell, as you know. One of those alternatives that you saw was the quote-unquote perforation of the road itself, looking at multiple culverts along its length. Certainly not a public drainage issue, but a study of it. That had negligible effect in lowering waters on one side of Joe Drell versus the other. But that information is available for the city to collaborate with the district on if they'd like it, as they advance their stormwater management. Notably, in all due respect, you may recall Mr. Schmidt's presentation regarding history of the area, the Army Corps of Engineers receiving multiple comments regarding existing flooding. This was ahead of the establishment, the placement of the road in the area. So it is historically wet, those types of things. Those can be challenging areas to address stormwater in because you're already in the lower portion of the subwatershed.
Mr. President, just to follow up on the comments here. I specifically had in mind the drainage that comes off of the Jordale from the north, and goes down on the west side and then underneath the road back to the east side. Things like that are cause continual water to move and those kinds of adjustments, not just the pipes underneath the road. Some people might think that they're negligible, but when you run that stormwater back on the high side instead of on the low side, and it causes frustration for the landowners and continues to lengthen the flooding issues.
So at a minimum, as a result of, if we pass this, which we've not yet voted on, if we pass this, the city will be looking at lowering the culvert on Joe Drell, and we'll have an opportunity to consider size, the comments of the public about 100-year rainfalls, et cetera, as its authority, as the road authority, and bringing a permit to us. Is there further discussion? At this point, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
I will vote for continuance on this, but as I said earlier, I believe this isn't going to be the end and that this would be adjusted some more.
So I take it that's an aye.
That's why I said I would vote.
So it passes 4 with 1 abstention.
Yeah, you didn't ask if there was
I'm sorry.
opposed. I was going to vote no.
You're gonna
So,
vote no.
yeah, we can fight about it later.
Okay. So it passes 3 with 1 negative and 1 abstention. Are we on to our next item?
Yes, Manager Bradley, Board of Managers, next on your agenda is number 5, which is the Houston Engineering Task Order 2303. That's in regards to Anoka County Ditch 5362, repair report on branches 5 and 6. Tom's going to address this matter for you. It is found on page 91 of your packet.
Yes, Manager Bradley and Board of Managers. Per your prioritization that you've developed on repairs for the drainage systems, usually we go through that every spring. The next set of drainage systems to be repaired are branches 5 and 6 of 5362, which are on the, let me get my direction, north and north part of the 5362 system. In order to do so, we need to develop a repair report. And then this task order allows Houston to move forward with that repair report. And staff recommends adopting the repair report.
Any questions of Tom? Not going to have a motion?
Well, I move to excuse me, Mr. Chair, I move to authorize the board to execute Houston Engineering Task Order 2023-003 to complete a repair report for portions of ACD 53-62, including branches 5 and 6 and associated laterals for the amount of $82,200.
Is there a second? I will second it. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Mr. Administrator.
Yes. President Bradley, Board of Managers, next on your agenda is U.S. Site Works partial pay request number 6. That's on Anoka County Ditch 5362 is the main trunk repair project. Ashley is out in the field this morning, so I'm going to handle that item. It is found on page 101 of your packet. I can share with you that the work on the system, you'll recall there was a incident with the equipment out there, but the work should be up and running on Monday the 19th, and substantial completion is expected by July 13th. This is a later time frame. It will require a change order, which is in process with your district engineer and legal. City stormwater work will begin on July 5th. And we have communicated with the city that matter and have invited them to the weekly construction meeting the week prior to that work being undertaken. With that, I direct you again to page, what was it, 101, where you'll see a proposed motion and the amount of the request for pay.
Any questions of the administrator? We have a motion then.
Yes, Mr. President, I'll move approval of the U.S. Site Work Incorporated pay request number 6 as submitted and certified by the district engineer and direct staff to issue payment in the amount of $4,928.13.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Passes 5-0. Mr. Administrator.
Yes, Manager Bradley, the next two items, if you're willing to advance on those based on our time.
Please.
Okay, new item 7 was the U.S. Geological Survey Joint Funding Agreement, stream gauge on Rice Creek in Mounds View. Matt's still here to address that. That's found on page 56 of your packet.
Welcome back, Matt.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, here seeking approval for a joint funding agreement between the Rice Creek Watershed District and the U.S. Geological Survey. This is for a stream gauge that the USGS operates on Rice Creek. We've been partnering with the USGS now since 2008 when they installed this gauge. The gauge just so happens to be across the street from their office, very convenient for them. But the data that is provided by this gauge for the district is very valuable. This is used in calibration of the district-wide model, sediment transport studies. We use it in our cart management program. People that use the Rice Creek Water Trail are regularly directed to this and it provides information for them. So there are a number of uses. As is their model now, this is always done with the cost share. All of the USGS stream gauges are done by cost share with local agencies who wish to run them, or state agencies, I believe. I'm sharing on my screen here a view of the USGS gauge on Rice Creek. This is a real-time look at it, but showing data going back over the past calendar year. So it provides a nice record. Personally, I feel like it provides a nice barometer of overall water levels across the district. Interestingly, we can see this past spring we went from significant flood conditions in late April and early May to a new term, what I've heard is a flash drought. Water levels have dropped very quickly across the watershed, including on Rice Creek. We're down to under 10 CFS, I believe now, cubic feet per second. But don't need to talk too much more about that. The annual costs and the total costs are provided on page 58 of the board packet. We've done these cost share agreements differently over the years. Occasionally, we've done these multi-year agreements where the costs for each year are mapped out, or we've done single years. To be honest, a multi-year effort is just more efficient for staff and for them. It's less paperwork to approve a 4-year agreement. So the costs are laid out there. You can see it's roughly a 64%, 36% breakdown, with the district funding about 64%, the USGS paying about 36%. This is a 4-year agreement, so running through the end of calendar year 2027. Total cost to the district is $56,833. This would be paid for out of the district's 9004 water monitoring budget, as it has been. And I'll stop there and answer any questions if you have them.
Matt, who actually maintains it and operates it?
Yep, President Bradley of USGS does.
Okay.
Fully.
Any other questions?
Mr. Chair, I would gladly move to authorize the administrator to enter into a 4-year agreement with the U.S. Geological Survey for the operation and maintenance of the stream gauge located on Rice Creek for an amount not to exceed $56,833.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes 5-0.
And Mr. Chair, before Matt goes, I understand you've had some direct experience with USGS at this site. Is that part of your resume?
Yes, Manager Wine and President Bradley. I worked at USGS prior to coming to Rice Creek.
Yes.
Yep.
Great.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Mr. Administrator.
Manager Bradley, Board of Managers, next on your revised agenda is number 8, the copier scanner lease. You may know we have a large piece of equipment in the back room of the district office that is a scanner, it is a printer, it is a copier. It does many things in this technology-rich age. Before us, we have a 5-year lease with that document because our current lease is coming up. The equipment is mobile, so if the district moves, they move it for us and set it up. The new equipment meets the district office needs. The print count that is in the lease agreement is reasonable, given the district volume of work. That's not to say that we won't exceed it periodically, all depends on what we're printing and such. There is a cost savings in the proposed lease. There have been some changes in the way they administer their leases, bundling the lease and the maintenance, or the number of copies, if you will. So the current lease and the maintenance has a separate billing, but there is that savings of roughly $2,333 under the new lease. So I would direct you to page 98 of your packet. There's a motion there for the district to enter into the lease.
Mr. President, being a benefactor of this machine and a great appreciation and admirer of it, I move to authorize the administrator, on the advice of council, to enter into the 5-year lease agreement with the RICO IMC 4510 copier.
And if it makes you happy, I will second that.
I really like this machine.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, 5-0.
And if they need to have an upgrade, I would like to see the new models too. I like that machine.
My wife works for RICO. She'll be happy to hear that.
Mr. Administrator, next.
Yes, President Bradley, Board of Managers, next is your check register for consideration.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the check register dated June 14th, 2023 in the amount of $111,354.57, prepared by Red Path and Company.
Is there any other, is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, passes. District engineer update, that's what we're up to?
Yes?
Chris, you want to have any comments?
Mr. President, no, I don't have any specific comments to make, but certainly can address any questions the board may have.
Anyone have any questions of Chris? Since this is provided for us for informational purposes, I don't think there's any motion necessary. And so are we administrator update?
Yes, Board of Managers, not too much new since our Monday meeting. I will note that we're looking at the district-provided health insurance to our employees. That comes up every year for renewal. Like a lot of things we see, it does have some inflation on it, but we'll put that into our budget accordingly and look at what options are before us. So,
Manager updates. Manager Waller.
Thank you, Mr. President. I went down to Madison Lake to see the tour. I think you would have loved it, Mr. President. It was all about how do we fix lakes. We had 11 different sites of basically looking at drainage issues there. One of the things I noticed, though, was the impact of the 1960s air pollution law, federal law, and how that's changed agriculture in the state. It's much more noticeable down there than it is in my area in northern Washington County. And that the amount of bare soil I saw from crop rotation and the amount of corn that's grown for the ethanol business. And so I think that part of our water quality issues, God forbid I say this out too loud here and the farm organizations hear me, is due to the immense amount of ethanol that's created, and hopefully the recent federal law changes and emphasis will be on less use of ethanol or carbon products, and that air pollution then will be replaced. So it was an interesting tour there. I attended the Washington County Consortium, and they were again talking about lakes. Seems to be the topic of the month. And in this case, there were two presentations. One of them was about South Washington County's work on how to rehabilitate the wetlands and down in Gray Island area. And the one in Forest Lake by Comfort Lake, Forest Lake District was they've gone to the point where they have now rented some open crop ground to have it planted down into forage crop all year round. They don't want it corn and beans anymore because they felt it was a contributing phosphorus to one of their small lakes that's upstream of Forest Lake. That was an interesting idea that they've now become a land operator. And in addition to that, they've also been studying their photos from the 1930s that we've had in agriculture and looked at old farmsteads that have completely disappeared and have gone to the point of actually removing from, if they were built near a wetland, removing those soils and changing them. So Forest Lake is very active in that point of view. I also attended the Forest Lake City Council meetings, as I mentioned earlier, but I was there Monday night because the city of Forest Lake passed an ordinance, which is, I bring to your attention, it's a change in their wetland rules, and they basically, to make this short, they are prohibiting wetland mitigation banks within the city limits. So what's the background here? Well, somebody came out, the city of Forest Lake in the southwest corner, and this is between Highway 61 and 35E, and they purchased some fairly large farm parcels there, like half a section. That's, I understand that's more than 320 acres. I think they said 360 something at the meeting. Then they came into the Planning Commission and said, we want to establish a 240 or 300 acre wetland bank. Now we're talking about land that's not wetland. currently. We're not talking about enhancing. We're talking about corn and bean production land that was on their comp plan to be used for houses or industry or something of value, higher improvement in value. And this was a plan that they're talking about devaluing, taking land and devaluing it to wasteland. And this got to be quite a discussion. So they had a moratorium for a year. And then on Monday night, they passed an ordinance that, no, we don't need this. In Forest Lake, we have 34% of the Forest Lake Township and city are considered water and wetlands already. And so we have a limit on the actual usable upland. This is, so I point out to you that apparently you can buy property for $10,000, $11,000 an acre if it's a large enough parcel, and then hopefully turn it into a wetland bank for $150,000 an acre. And the problem with this is, of course, is that once that's done, the maintenance costs are in perpetuity. And as the Bowser has explained to me earlier this year when I was talking to Jasky about it, was, well, they can just walk away from it and make it tax title, and it becomes the responsibility of the maintaining the wetland then goes with the county or the city. So that. And finally, last night, and by the way, Commissioner Muron was there at that meeting also listening to this. It was an interesting concept. We had, it was a surprise to me. I happen to know the family farm from my life in Forest Lake. Anyways, last night I was at Birchwood, and they're concerned about Preview Lake. That hasn't gone away. So, but they're very thankful for the dollars that were sent, and very appreciative, and look forward to working with us some more. They have a new mayor. Mayor Ford is there to now. Mayor Wynant is gone. And they have a couple new council members, but Council Member McCarthy, who we worked with, is still on the board. So that's an important issue there. And I think that pretty well finishes up my report.
Well, as I mentioned, I was at the Citizens Advisory Committee, and they continue to be very active and engaged, looking for someone from Ramsey County and someone from Washington County. So let's keep our ears open to fill out that advisory committee. I am not able to attend the Minnesota Watershed meeting coming up this week, and do hope that there are some staff and some board members who might be joining them. This is in Albert Lea. And it, again,
I will be at Albert Lea.
Great. Look forward to hearing your report. That's it.
You know, I don't have any comments, but I forgot to ask Matt a question on the fish barrier. I happened to be driving by there, and I saw a guy with a big net walking down there with a cooler. And I'm just curious if they're netting northerns out of there, or what the issue is. Have you had any problems with that, or?
Yeah, Manager Wagman, we've alerted DNR conservation officers to the fact that there is a new barrier there, and they do have a tendency to bring people in because they bring fish in and people are interested.
Oh, he's pretty brazen. I mean, it's just right across the street from City Hall, basically. Or
yeah, Manager Wagman, I was interested to learn, digging further into DNR fisheries rules, that netting of invasive species like common carp is allowed. So I don't know if this person you're referring to,
maybe that's what
they were netting,
doing.
but using dip nets to collect and keep common carp and other invasive species is allowed, and there's no limit.
Maybe that's what he was doing. I have no idea. Just asking. Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, as long as you're at it, how many carp were taken from that fish barrier? Because you were.
Yeah, I have the numbers. I'll have the numbers. I'll give you the estimate. Yeah, Manager Wynant, from the new fish barrier, in the neighborhood of 200 to 250 carp were taken. That's less than we expected, but that's partially due to that term that I used earlier, the flash drought. Water levels dropped very quickly in that system, and so we had that early pulse of carp, and we removed some. But water levels dropped so quickly that carp quickly were not able to use that stream anymore. But opportunities will exist in future years also.
Manager Robertson?
I have nothing to report, Mr. President.
And I too have nothing to report. So can we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? You get to go home.
Plenty of time.